Tomorrow we should learn maybe 6 o'clock, because 5 o'clock maybe.
Okay.
It
I won't be at 6, but it's okay.
is 5 better?
No, I'm gonna be away a whole day, so I think I'll be back.
Well, tomorrow night is Tsurba
I
Tsurba
know.
at 8:30. So I think we should learn like at 6 o'clock. 5 o'clock may be too early for me to get home from work. So let's make it at
Okay,
6.
okay.
6, might get 6, but I don't know if I'll be back anyway. Okay,
Can
I'll try.
we do it at 6:45? Or 7? You could do it
I
7.
don't know. Some people from out of town and that's just not sure. Okay, whatever time you want to do it.
Okay, let's do it at 6. That way we finish. We could have dinner. Okay.
107.
Yes, Kuf Zayin, 107. Rabbi, a time Reb Shimon Kedemar. Remember, we said Reb Shimon says you can't go back on your word. Yet we brought a case about if you donated for Purim, Reb Shimon was makel that you could spend the money on other things besides the Suda. Rabbiya, time Reb Shimon Gamliel, Kida Amar Mar, that Haiman Denichele. Haiman Denichele de Tidbare Are. Somebody wants to grow grain on a piece of land, and he doesn't want to weaken the land. So this is like Poor Richard's Almanac that the farmers used to use, little tricks. Lizra shasa chiti v'shasa sari shasa shesi v'shasa erev. 1 year you should plant wheat, the other you should plant barley. 1 year you should plant it in this direction, shesi, and the other year you plant it in the opposite direction, perpendicular. In that kind of planting will not damage the land. And it's only going to weaken the land if you plow immediately after your harvest. Aval kari v'tani less than ba. If you plow twice, then you don't have to worry about that. So, Tavula Yisrena kidneys. We said that if you made a contract to grow grain, you shouldn't grow legumes. Mas delay Rav Yudah L'Ravin. Tavula Yisrena kidneys. An opposite brisa that if you make a contract to grow grain, you can grow legumes. We have the opposite. It depends. Eretz Yisrael, there the land is weaker than in Bavel. In Eretz Yisrael, if you plant other than what was called for, there's a risk of damaging land, but not in Bavel. Watercress that grows among the flax. People are allowed to come by and pluck it. It's like doing weeding for the field. Doesn't do any damage, and you can take it. But in omdos al gvulit, if this watercress was planted on the border, yesh b'mishum gezel. The owner planting it there obviously wanted it as a special crop. Hukshul zera. If it's grown to the point where it already has seeds, so afilu bekitna nami. Even if it was within the field itself of the flax, you shouldn't take it. Yesh b'mishum gezel. My time, no. My afsid. That damage that would already occurred through growing with the flax already occurred. And therefore, by taking them out, which we said before was good for the field because it was like weeds, it's not really helping the field anymore. On Rav Yehuda Ravin Bar Rav Nachman, Ravin Achi, Ravin my brother, Hani Dili Dilcha, Bidilcha Dili. That which is mine is yours, and that which is yours is mine. They had fields next to each other, and the trees were sort of sticking out into his property, and that he said basically, your fruits is mine, my fruits is yours. No bnei mitzvah, people who had fields next to each other, ilan anoit lakan perosov lakan vanoit lakan lakan. They're not makpid if some of the fruits hanging over. Each would take which is overhanging their land. The itmar, ilan ha'oimed ala metzah, a tree that is on the border. Amarav anoit lakan lakan vanoit lakan lakan. That which is leaning towards that belongs to that. That which is leaning there belongs to that. Ushmul amar cholkin. Shmuel says easier, you divide 50-50 all the fruit on the trees that are on the border. To you have to derive kasha on what Rav said, that it depends on where it's leaning over. You fill the whole border with trees that belong to both of them. So what's the chiddush? Of course they're going to have to divide it. Even though they were filling up the border, there was leaves hanging over to one side more. Still wakati ma'ila meimet. That's not a chiddush. Maybe each one will get the pairs that are growing on their side. So why did you divide it that way? Divide this way. So therefore, you just divide everything equally. Ravin bar Rav Nachman, Ravin Achi, Ravin my brother. Lo tizben ar desmich lamasa. Don't buy land that's very close to the city. And we're talking about fields to plant. When there's stalks growing in a field, you shouldn't stand in your neighbor's field. You're going to create an ayin hara when you look at the field. And therefore the eighth says, don't buy land near a city. People can be looking at the field and giving you an ayin hara. Or says, Aini. This advice is not correct. Ravava met up with the Talmidim of Rav. How did Rav teach the following pasuk? Baruch atah ba'ir, uvaruch atah basadeh. Blessed are you in the city, blessed are you in the field. Baruch atah b'voecha, baruch atah b'tzeisecha. Blessed is your coming, blessed is your going. Amar lehachi kamarav. This is what Rav meant. This is how he darshan. Baruch atah ba'ir, she'ei beischa samach lebeis hakneses. Number one, you should buy a house close to a shul. Baruch atah basadeh, she'ei nechasecha krovim le'ir. Your assets, including your real estate assets, should be close to the city. So here we see clearly that Rav is going against what he said before, that you shouldn't have a field near a city. You should be blessed when you come home after a long trip. Your wife is not a suffix neither. You're not going to be able to have relations. Which he teaches that your tzetzaim, means your children should be like you. V'amerluhu, Rav Abba responded to these drushas that Rav Yochanan lo amar, that Rav Yochanan didn't agree with Rav. Ella, this is what he said. Rav Yochanan, Baruch atah ba'ir, sheyeh beis hakisei samach l'shulchanecha. Your bathroom should be close to where you eat. That way you don't have too far to go if you need to go to the bathroom. But you don't have to live near a shul. Why? Rav Yochanan tamei, because you get reward. The longer you walk to shul, the more reward you get. Baruch atah basodeh, she'ei nechasecha meshuloshin. if you're going to buy agricultural land, you should diversify your agricultural assets. Shlish betfua, a third in grain. Shlish bezesim, a third in olives, and shlish bekafanim, and a third in grapes. Baruch atah bevoecha, baruch atah betzeisecha. Shetehei yitziascha ben oilam kiviyascha la'oilam. Your death should be like when you were born. Ma biyascha la'oilam b'lo chet. You came into the world without sin. Af yitziascha ben oilam b'lo chet. So when you leave the world, you should also not have chet. So Rav held that there was in another drasha held that there was a milah to have your field near the city. So how do we reconcile this contradiction? If you surround your field with walls, so people can't look in, so there's no ayin hara. So there you could have a field close to the city. If you're not going to build a fence around it, it shouldn't be close to the city. So the pasuk in Dvorim says, "Ve'isir Hashem imcha kol choli." Hashem will remove illness from you. Amarav, zu ayin hara. The pasuk is saying that Hashem will remove ayin hara from the people, which lechura causes sickness. Rav tamed Rav sak lebei kivri. Rav once went to a cemetery. Avad Maida Avad. Whatever he did, besod, to figure out why did all these people die. Omar Tishin v'Tisha ba'ayin hara echa b'derchetz. There's 100 people buried here. 99 died because of ayin hara. One died through natural causes. So that's how Rav explained Heiser Hashem imcha kol choyli. Shmuel Amar, what's choyli ze ruach? The wind. All illnesses come because of the atmosphere. Shmuel was a doctor. So when people get wounds, etc., and it gets infected by germs from the air, that's the cause of illness. What about when the king chops off somebody's head? That's not ruach. So I guess if it wasn't for the wind, the doctors would be able to cure. I'm not sure how they could cure cutting off your head, but maybe other wounds that would be inflicted could be cured. Now, Rav Chanina Omar, that when it says Ve'isir Hashem imcha kol choyli zut tzina, tzina means cold, like getting a cold. Rav Chanina hakol bidei shamayim chutz mitzinim pachim. Everything comes from heaven, except if a person runs around outside on a cold day without proper clothing, he brought it on himself. And that's not bidei shamayim. Shenemar tzinim pachim b'derech akash shomer nafshi yirachik mehem. Somebody who cares for his nefesh should stay away from things that cause colds. Rav Yosef Rechanina Omar zut soa. It's your excrement. The Omar Mar, or anything any fluid that emanates from the person. For example, soas achoitem, mucus coming from the nose. Soas ha'oizen, wax that comes out of the ear. Reuben kosher, if it's a lot, it's going to damage. Umiyut yofa, having a little bit is good. Rabbi Lazar Omer Zumora. When it says Ve'isir Hashem imcha kol choyli, it refers to diseases of the gallbladder. Mora is bile. And this was based on Greek medicine, Hippocratic and Galenic medicine. They talked about black bile and green bile. and the lack of balance between white bile and black bile and green bile and red bile. Lama nikra shma machla. Why is mara called machla? Shehi machla kol gufa shalodam. Because it's the root of all illnesses. Davar acher machla. Because the gematria is shmonim u'shloisha chalon. There's 83. Comes out it's 85, but the more says 83. No, I'm sorry, it's 83. Machla is 83. Kimini macha, tlun v'mark, and they're all connected to the gallbladder. The kula achilas pashachris b'melach and kiton shamayim avatan. If you have a piece of bread in the morning with salt and a glass of water for breakfast, simple meal, that will heal the body. So, 13 good things were said to praise eating a good breakfast. Matzeles minachamo, it saves from overheating. Minatzina, from cold. Minazikin, the various demons. Minamazikin, umachkimas pesi, being tricked. And Zocha Bedin, he's going to win in Bezdin. He's going to lilmod Torah l'lamed. He's going to merit to learn Torah well. Udvarav nishmaim. His psak halacha will be listened to. The Talmud miskayim biyari. He'll remember his learning. Vein b'sar mala havel. He won't sweat too much. Nizkak li'ishto. He'll be able to perform with his wife when needed. Vein misavel isha acheres. He doesn't have lust for other women. And it destroys worms that are in the intestine. That's how important breakfast is. It removes jealousy and brings in love. He's healthy, so he doesn't lean towards he doesn't get upset, doesn't fight with people. From where did the saying go? Shisin Rahiti Road, 60 people ran, and he didn't catch up to the guy who had breakfast. Wake up and have breakfast in the summer, and that'll protect you from the heat. And in the winter, it'll protect you from the cold. From where? Amr lei dichsiv lo yiravu lo yitzamu yakim sherav v'shemesh. Pasuk in Yeshaya. Why lo yakim sherav v'shemesh? Kivan shlo yiravu lo yitzamu. You will not be struck by too much heat or too much cold because you were not starving yourself from eating and drinking. You woke up early and ate and drank. So, Omar Le, so Rava responded, you quoted that pasuk, I'll bring you this pasuk. It says, Vavaratem es Hashem lokecha, serve your God, uveirachas lach b'cha v'smeimecha, and you'll have a blessing in your bread and your water. Vavaratem es Hashem lokecha, zu kriyash ma'u tefillah. You wake up first and you say kriyash man yudaven, which is avodas Hashem. Then you can eat breakfast. When he eats bread and water after his breakfast, this will prevent illness. Rav Yehuda was a measurer to measure fields, like George Washington. He was a surveyor. Don't treat this lightly. And even if you're measuring a small piece of land, even a small piece of land, you can plant sesame, which was a very profitable something crop to grow. So don't be mezalzel, even a small piece of land. Unreadel ravada mishucha arba amos danigra zilzabu. But the 4 amos close to a riverbank, people are mezalzel in that. And you don't have to measure it exactly. You can measure it with a little extra. Danhar lo timshuch klal. The arbam is close to a river. You don't have to measure at all. You could just use a large measure. Why? This is needed. This arba amos next to a ditch is needed for the people who sit on the ditch. And Danhara de Kula Alma, the 4 amos next to a river, is needed for the sailors. The people who would, the stevedores, the people who would pull the ropes of the boat and tie them up. You can cut the trees that are there, so it shouldn't interfere in their work. Rav Nassan bar Shia Kitz Shitzer Amsa. He cut 16 amos of trees on either side of the river. Also, Alei b'nei Mishron de Panu. They beat him because he cut down these trees. Who savar? If you're gonna make a road, you got to make it Rishus Harabim. Rishus Harabim is 16 amos wide. But below, he also beaten in Kulahai. Rishus Harabim needs it. But Hacha Mishum Amtuchya Ashilanu. Here you need to tighten the ropes in order to pull the boats in. Kamale Katve Nagdi Sagi. And those that are schlepping things off the boat. Rabba Baravuna Avaleahu Abba Gudadinara. Rabba Baravuna had a forest on the bank of a river. Armale Niktutsmar. They asked him to cut it down. Because we've learned that you can cut the trees next to a river to help the boats. Let the people who live above me on the river and below me, they should do it, and then then I'll do it. Now the Gemara says, what do you mean? If it's good for him, if it's good for them, why wouldn't it be good for him? The chsiv is kosher v'koshu, that you should. So you should do it first, then other people should do it. You should go first. Why do you want them to go first? So the Gemara says, awesome. The other orchards and forests that were on the bank of the river belonged to the chief officer of the army. So they're not going to listen to the rules of the Jewish people. So if they cut it, the Persian officers cut it, then I'll cut mine. If they're not going to cut, why should I cut? There would be no benefit. If the sailors can tighten the ropes without cutting it, because they can go to a different side of the river, they'll do that. Otherwise, they'll have to go to the other side. So there's no reason for cutting it for part of it. Either it's all or nothing. So he got out of cutting it for that reason. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Good.
No,
I got.
Very good. I got it. No, but the beginning of